the first thing we need to do is elect Chair Pro Tem, as Richard Cowell wasn't able to attend today when we moved our meeting date up to avoid Memorial Day.
I will make it first thing.
Oh.
Well, a second.
Well, actually, I'm recused on one of these items, so it'd probably be best that I pass them stuff. So
So wait, I'll do withdraw her motion, and we do withdraw your second?
I'll withdraw the second.
And there's a new motion?
I move that we nominate Alderman Kennedy.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
I get to jump back in?
This is my first meeting.
Well, not exactly.
You go any way you want.
Talk about it.
Do whatever you want. Just for all you who might not know, Alderman Kennedy said on this, represented the Public Safety Committee for the Preservation Board, and he is now starting to do that again. So it's his first here to sit, but not very certainly knows what's what. Oh, Donna, I see some of the housekeeping work we usually do at the beginning of the meeting is on our title page as far as reviewing the minutes and approving the agenda. You can find it on those sides. We usually just call the roll.
Yeah, we have to do a roll.
Call the roll, approve the minutes of April, and then approve the agenda. I would note before we approve the agenda that item E, 4343 McPherson was just dissolved here before the meeting started, so we withdraw from the agenda. So we will have.
So we need to approve the agenda?
Yeah, with the alteration with item E.
Okay. We've already had a roll.
No, I don't.
So let's call. We call the meeting to order, let's call. I need to call. Then I need a lick. Okay. Mrs. Callow.
It's absent.
Melanie.
What's that?
Anthony Robinson.
Not present.
David Richardson.
Is not present.
Present. David Vincent.
Is not present.
Kennedy. Here. Nate Johnson. Present. Mary Wright.
Present.
Good day, we have a call.
Yes.
To establish the quorum, next we'll have the approval of the agenda, or we need to go to the minutes.
You do the minutes.
The minutes, okay. Let's have a motion to accept the minutes for April 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
We moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of April 27th. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, let's call the roll. You can call the roll to this, you do it by just aye.
Well,
Just voting. Okay then. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes of April 27th have been approved. Next, we need to approve the agenda for the day's meeting. Is there a motion? Item E has been removed from the agenda, therefore we need to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda with the exception of item E.
second.
Then moved and seconded that we approve the agenda with the exception of item E. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda with the extraction of item E, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries to accept the agenda with the changes. Okay, next agenda item is the item A, 5539 One Kirby.
Director Bradley.
You'll be presenting?
You're presenting on item A?
Okay.
All right, this is agenda item A, 539 to 51 Pershing Avenue, construction. I am Betsy Bradley, the Director of the Cultural Resources Office. This is the site where the new construction is proposed. A little different site than we usually find in the Central West End Historic District where this project is located. Close site where a 5-story apartment building is proposed. Here's the project site. This parcel includes parking behind some of the adjacent buildings to the east. And here's a bird's eye view from Bing with the blue circle there right on the tennis court to show the context for this project. It's a little hard to get well, the leaves are all out on the trees, but I would point your attention to the block space that the building will be on are typically 3-story, very closely spaced, flat buildings. And across the street are so-called the triplet street, nearly identical 5-story apartment building, and 6-story apartment building slightly there to the west. And so there is some context for 5- and 6-story buildings that are being right across the street. Here are the triplets opposite the side on Pershing. And the typical type of the apartment buildings on Pershing continue to have this pattern of projecting bays and sort of sunroom windows there with one opening with 3 sets of sash in them. And they're so closely spaced together, if you drive or walk down that street, they present a pretty solid block front of buildings as opposed to a block front of single-family dwellings where there's more space between each one and a rhythm established by the building and the space between. Here's the proposed new sign. As you can see, it is somewhat wider than the building on its side of the street and perhaps even the individual buildings across the street, although its width is comparable to the 3 triplets. They're perceived somewhat together because the driveways are curved and they're close spacing. And we have 2 tons of brick on the lower story, a red brick and a brown brick, 2 colors of cement board panels on the upper story. We have some roofed windows that have that sunroom feeling. We have some more single extension windows as well. The long length of the width of the facade is broken out by some projecting bays, as well as that off-center entrance and the elevator tower right behind the entrance, which has a 2-story interior lot space there. Here are the side elevations. You can see that the brick returns considerable amount on both sides to those corner units. Parking will be provided on the first story of the building, and there'll be iron fencing like grading enclosed the parking area. Here's the site plan. The building squarish in shape and has rather large internal car yard rising above parking level. And so that is how it is laid out. And then we'll have access to that parking which is adjacent to it to the east. Here's a view of the proposed building in the streetscape. This shows that the building rises 6 stories above its adjacent building. But also the way the brick is used, particularly on the bottom view where a little bit tighter comparison of the building to the left, that the range of brick is fixed. And it acknowledges the height of the flank building. And again, you would never perceive this exactly as presented in the rendering. There are the taller buildings across the street and the canopy trees there that are will leave about almost half the year. So there is some continuity as the streetscape. There is a bit wider spacing on the east side of the building. That's where the driveway goes back and there's the parking behind the adjacent building. So, other than that, it's attempted to build up the block front and maintain the solid block front and block side. And here we are back to side design. As far as the Central West End Historic District standards for new residential construction, the building does not meet the standards regarding height, which is to be within 15% of the height of the building. But there's also a statement in the intent section of the standards that states that compatible relationships are the goal. If it were a single-family building and it needs single-family residents, that didn't come up right. A single-family building, I think, would need to be closer in height to its flanking neighbors within that 15% category, where this type of building on this street with taller buildings across, it seems that this height could be considered compatible, even though it doesn't meet strictly the standards. Materials are similar to this that have been improved in other new buildings in this historic district. Quite a bit of brick, and for panels. There will be some wood used on a rain screen on the elevator tower area, and decorating balconies on the top of the So it seems to meet all the standards except for the height one, but we can use the compatible and immediate context summary of that situation. That is based on the standard. Therefore, based on my examination of the design and the standards, I recommend that Preservation Board grant preliminary approval subject to review of final documents and materials such as I have one letter for this puzzle. I received an email from Lana Cruzes today, and she supports the design. She doesn't know that we don't know yet what the north elevation would look like, but the material. And so, like, she has some questions about that. I see the Central West End Planning and Development Committee is not here. They have also reviewed this project and sent these comments. They state that many aspects of the proposed design were discussed, with several concerns addressed and others unresolved. The committee was particular in this developer has raised the recommendation of the pros to restore the original terrace condition at the front of the site. They have some concerns about the parking ratios, which really the board. There was discussion regarding the wood burning feature of the elevator shaft. And finally, there is concern regarding the visual impact of the noise rear elevation of the neighbors to the north. And there was no drawing about that matter remains unresolved. But overall, the West End Planning and Development Committee recommends that, like Cultural Resources Office, grant preliminary approval, subject to the final details, and they also include the parking ratio, which should have review it. So basically, they
Are there any questions? If not, we do have someone who is signed to testify. We can call them up at this time. Joe Fenton. You don't have anything to say? You want to add something to it?
There really isn't anything needed to say.
Okay.
We'll go through the process. Anything I say at this point, that's a little too much to say.
I have a question.
You have a question, Paul? Then you have to come up to the podium.
Do you have to swear on that?
Yes.
Could you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
And could you state your name and address for the record?
Jeff Listening, Walter Associates, 3109 South Grand, 6th Street, 118.
Yes, I just wondering, what's that north face going to look like?
You can go back to the, well, I got a board here that shows it, but it's, reminiscent of the east and west elevation. I can get to it. This is the north elevation. We'll have one tone of cement board, recesses at the balconies. These balconies are actually recessed 5 feet into the building. They will be a different color, a darker color. So we'll have some trade. Garage will be treated the same as the rest of the elevation.
She's here in the center.
I think it's what we told her when we showed it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we could entertain a motion. Yes.
I recommend that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval of this project, subject to review of final documents, materials, by the Cultural Resources Office.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? There's no discussion on the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? By your ayes, the motion carries. That takes us now to agenda item B, 10, Central Mississippi, and Jan County.
Another preliminary review for the construction of outdoor cover or patio cover and an small outdoor kitchen. It's going to be in the rear of this property, which is at 1024 Mississippi in the Lafayette Square Historic District, and it is at the corner of the house. Making from along the side yard of the property. And this is the proposed work. Please point this out. This will be the small barbecue grill kitchen. It's proposed screen from view of the street by a brick wall. The vocabulary of brick will be continued in a short street fence here, which will be wrought iron with interspersed brick posts along here and then also here. Currently, this is a parking area for the property owner with a driveway and curb cut at this point, and they don't want to lose that access. So we had some discussion with them about screening the whole lot. Not the way they'd like to go. They'd like to keep it as open as possible. This is the proposed patio cover, which extends 20 feet out and 20 feet back to provide some outdoor living space. Okay, this is, again, looking eastward along the property line. Okay, this is the actual location here of the proposed barbecue kitchen area, and the roof, as we'll see in a minute, will extend out to the space. Directly on. This will remain open, so you can see that the backyard will remain what the standards define as usable. That anything within the yard is subject to review. Again, the kitchen will be here. A short fence will extend outside. That's the elevation of the fence, little kitchen, and the patio cover. Please note that it obscures the window head of the addition, which is an addition to the building, but it is a historic. Another shot directly to the rear. There is an entry here, and that's the reason that the proposed cover extends over there to shelter that walkway. 12 feet tall here. So
So even should there be a privacy fence erected at the sidewalk, the patio cover will be placed. Now, standards require that any sort of addition or appendage to the building that is visible needs to follow a historic model example, which would mean an appendage constructed in 1893. There would be no applicable historic model for what the owner tried to achieve here. I discussed with the designer going to a flat roof structure, a pergola kind of deal. That also would not follow a model example, but it might come closer to the intent of the standards, which clearly states that modern conveniences should not be visible. At this point, staff feels totally comfortable down properties on the left. Back to this says also does not follow a historic model example which standards require. However, is wrought iron in between the posts. The posts, I think, are meant to tie in with the brick wall, so this brick wall appears to be part of the whole. Staff is recommending approval of this. Well, it doesn't supposed to follow the standards. Most street fences in the district are wrought iron, and this will be predominantly wrought iron. Because of the relatively small size of the backyard, there really isn't a better location for the barbecue, and this brick wall will be that from the street, will not be just behind that wall. However, staff is recommending that the board hold approval for the patio cover, and that something that more closely relates to the certain model example.
Are there any questions on the presentation? If not, there are two who have signed to testify. First, we have Keith Alton.
Could the homeowner go first?
Sure. Is that Stephen?
I'm Steve Coffey, I'm the architect for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Yes. Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
And could you state your name and address for the record?
My name is Stephen Coffey. I live at 1102 Bell Reeve. I'm representing the owners at 1024 Mississippi. If I may, I'll go through a little bit of a discussion about the context or the reason for the design that we chose. If I may, I'd like to pass out a few additions that do get some reference to context, if I may. Do I give it to you?
Yes, please pass them to down on you first.
Okay.
At the end.
I'm sorry, I only made 6. Should have made 12. A few more, it looks like. Basically, what the project entailed, as Jan indicated, was an improvement to the rear portion of the property that is side yard behind the structure. They have a patio, a parking lot, and they would like to add a barbecue pit and a patio cover. Right now there is a current patio, but it doesn't have any shelter over it. The patio itself is about 11 foot from the face of the building to the edge of the parking lot, and it extends about 20 foot from north to south, from one side of the building to the next. As Jan indicated, we have a brick and wrought iron fencing that is not exactly the same as some of the historic models, but it is certainly replicated in multiple locations within the square and is relatively compatible. The part that is in question is the shelter. And as you look at it, can we put the image of the elevation up?
I'm sorry,
Just a reference. It'll show the hip portion of it. There, thank you.
The part that's in question is the shelter. And what we've done is tried to look at a vehicle that would shelter that 11 by 20 area, if you will. The owner, because of the configuration of the structure and the height of the windows, we had to raise the top part of the roof, the highest part, above the head of the window. Otherwise, it would come in the middle. If we only had a pergola or some sort of flat roof that was at 8-foot elevation, it would bisect the top portion of the window, which is one of the things that the historic district prefers not to do, nor does the owner. So we raised the roof a little bit at the juncture to the building, and then of course we had to have a watershed so that it shed the water off of it to the outside. In this case, it was made with 2x10 wood structures, rafters, and the owner was looking at trying to maintain a significant amount of natural light through the shelter. So they were looking at a tempered glass roof that would be placed on top of the structure. You find that at several places in Compton Heights on some of the entryways, but there's not any reference like that in Lafayette Square. I had turned the corner to a hip configuration so that it sheltered the patio and then it also sheltered the entrance to the basement and to the side. And it also gives a sense of closure to the structure. If you look at some of the images that I provided, there's a couple there at Benton Place, which has their solid roof, but it does have a hip configuration. And if you go back through some of the other images, those are more recent images that have been approved by this council as recently as the last couple of years because of new construction. Basically, they're trying to find a way to shelter and keep the rain off while they're outside in the patio, and yet have a structure that would be harmonious with the neighborhood. May not find an absolute match because of materials, where they were looking at translucent glass as opposed to shingles, but we felt that it was something that allowed natural light through the interior windows, looking out, and then as you were on the patio, looking up at the sky, while you're sheltered from the rain. Having said that, that's the challenge that we had for coming up with a design. I felt that the flat roof or something that had less of a slope really would cause more problems with the historic district than the solution that was presented. Any questions?
That's the question. Are there any questions? Okay. Thank you. Houghton. What?
I'm Keith Houghton. I swear to tell the truth. 1805 LaSalle. I'm Vice President of Lafayette Square Restoration Committee, in particular the Development Committee, which we work with the Historic Standard. My first comment is this is the first time we've seen this today. So we've not had the opportunity to present this to the committee. My initial reaction is the fence is fine. There are a number of fences like this, and even though they don't meet the code, a glass roof patio is totally unacceptable to the neighborhood. That is not historic in any way, shape, or form. We've not explored the alternatives. I can't address the issues. I did not get a copy of what the gentleman handed out. But Benton Park and Compton are not the examples for Lafayette Square. I just can't imagine a glass-covered roof. I opens the door for all kinds of craziness in that neighborhood, and I can't support that.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Braddock?
Yes.
I guess I'll, never on the side, table, I'm usually the other side. My name is Aaron Braddock, I do consider to swear and tell the truth. I'm the owner of Tingeling for Mississippi Avenue. The reason why we wanted to have this covering was to allow some natural sunlight and to allow for some covering from the elements while we're trying to devote the property. I believe you have in front of you pictures of, in black and white, of the structure, of the different structures that are around the area. I did not bring copies. I didn't know I was going to have to say anything. But I did bring a set of color photos, if I can approach, that I think kind of show the I believe those photos are probably a better representation of other structures within the neighborhood. Some recently granted, some, I think they're still building the actual structure itself, including, and I'm sorry, I don't know the street names, they're probably on your original attachment, but you can see just the design of also the fence as well as the covering with the actions. I certainly agree that I haven't seen necessarily the glass structure, but I haven't done a tour around the entire neighborhood, but I'll certainly take the gentleman at his word that there is not one. But that's all I have to say. If there's any questions, I'll do it again.
Any questions?
So I'm curious, if you and Mr. Coffey, like, looked at other options, here the neighborhood's pretty much against this, and perhaps skylights, something that would be visible from the street, are you dead set on this solution?
No, sir. I think we'd be okay with skylights. I think if you were to stand back up, I don't know if you remember the code as well as I've made myself remember it, but I don't think skylights are necessarily allowed to leave it, unless you're going to say those are okay.
Yeah, they could be visible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's something we'd be against. No.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. No other questions? Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, we can entertain a motion. Okay,
I move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval for the proposed fence and screening wall with final details to be approved by the Public Works Office. That the board would hold preliminary approval for the proposed patio cover until the design is submitted to comply with the board's final expansion.
Been moved, do we have a second? Second. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. By your motion, we have adopted of item D. We'll take us now on to item C. What is that? Forest Supervisor Dr. Martin King.
I'm Bob Bettis of staff to present a pre-lab tour. Get there. 4232 Spectrum OK. It's trying to construct a 54-unit independent senior living apartment building at the corner of MLK and Pendleton. It's a really good project. We're really happy. Go through real quick here, the idea where we're at. We're at that southeast corner of MLK and Pendleton. You can see here, it's the hatch area. Apartments in the historic district are outward, but still all up for review. Some context along the area. The upper photograph, the Crescent Field, that's the location of the project. And the bottom shot shows kind of across the street context. And some more shots. On the upper left, that is the ugly area of construction. There is one existing house in the area, one right there on the left. Down below, on the bottom left, that's on Pendleton looking back towards Pendleton. And then on the bottom right, that's kind of a shot in the alley between the district and outside of the district, looking at the area. side plan. Great, it's going to be up to the street, we appreciate it. It's a large structure, it's going to turn corner and go from MLK down. And here are the streetscapes, and they are great. We have brick, 3-story, brick on both street sides. The bottom, you have the Pendleton side, and on the top is okay. And it's also the rear, so it's also brick in the back. This is the detail we'll see along the street. That's kind of a varying shades of red brick. They'll kind of go up and down the block, kind of give it some depth, texture, some great degrees of appearance. And see the facade kind of steps back a little bit here and there to give it some depth. Looking at the standards, we use residential standards for this. It's zone residential, so we use that even though it's along a corridor. It does not comply with the height portion of it. However, we feel that 3 stories is not really attracting the area. Across the street, as we saw before, you have 2-story buildings mostly, but the 3 stories really won't attract the overall streetscape because it's fine. It does reference other buildings in the area, so we think overall it's fine. And also location, it's hard to be 10 feet apart from its neighboring structures. Given the loss of context along MLK, you really can't make that 10 feet happen. I think that's okay as well. Beyond those 2 parts of the bill standard, it all complies. The materials, roof shape, fencing, paving, parking, it all complies out. Signage will be done under a later permit. So overall, apply a letter of support from the alderperson. Alderman Moore supports the project, so I'll do that in the record. So based on all that, we recommend that the board grant preliminary approval for the project in relation to the final plans and materials reviewed by and approved by the CRO.
Okay. Are there any questions? Go back one slide now.
We got some kind of glass feature at the corner?
Yeah, the corner will be a glass at the stairwell.
And plus?
Any other questions?
Nancy's here from Roseland Social City questions.
She's also signed. I have a question for you. Sure. Under the preliminary findings and conclusion, you say that you have been here for a while.
Sure.
Use the criteria from Central West End Historic District standards. Is that something
that is a typo, and we agree. That is a typo.
All right. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pat.
Welcome back. Yeah.
All right. This is a typo.
It's the bill.
It's the bill. Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? If not, we do have someone who is signed up to speak. Nancy Rodney.
I don't need to unless you have questions for me.
Are there any questions that we may have? Okay. If not, we could, if there is a discussion, if there's no discussion on this matter, we can entertain a motion. Item C.
Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to design, code, stipulation, and final plan for use of bridge.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. For item C, is there any discussion on the motion? If no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? By your votes, the ayes have it, the motion passes. Now go to item D. No. Yes, item D.
That's recused, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Actually, Anderson to us then, and we're going to write the standards back from this for this one. 43 Straight Street, Pearson, the prelim for a new single-family house. What's that? We'll start with this. This is the site, the south side of Pearson. Empty lot there, your screen location of post house. More shop the area questions. The driveway is for the neighboring house to the west. That's not part of the proposed project. Here's the context. Just for reference points, the building on the left was used for inspiration for the detailing on the proposed building and our shot of the site. This is the proposed site plan. The building does line up with neighboring buildings. But the garage will be put at the alley, access. Here is a rendering of the proposed street face facade. East elevation and west. Notice it's all brick, which is great. And here's a streetscape shot showing it with the neighboring building. Fenestration lines up, massing is correct, roof height lines with neighboring buildings. That's all good as well. Met with architects to kind of tweak a few things. He did so. We appreciate that. Also, they met with Central West Bend, and they have also given their support for that as well, for the proposed products. And I'll send record as well. They, planning and development committees, their recommendation, they're okay with the design. Looking at the construction standards, briefly, the height, scale, and massing applies. Everything lines up with the neighboring house. Materials, again, it's all brick, great. Again, fenestration lines up, and it's the correct size with the neighboring building. Back to the house, that complies. Curb cuts, driveways, again, there's alley access for their garage porch, that's fine. So, in conclusion, Chair recommends that the board grant plan approval for the proposed construction. Condition of the solid drawings and materials be approved by CRO.
Are there any questions on the presentation?
Yes, sir. I did sign up. So, I do have one thing to add. Mike Killeen, I'm the architect of the project, 3015 Solina. The alderperson from that district, Lyda Cruson.
Sorry, Jim, you did get a late email today. I think she also was supportive.
That's all I wanted to add. If you have any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Are there any other discussions about item B? If not, we can entertain a motion.
I move that preliminary approval be granted, subject to review of final documents and materials by the Cultural Resources Office.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? So discussion on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Item E has been taken off the agenda. So that takes us to is there supposed to be materials for item F in the package with them?
Yes, on page 28? No. Label G.
It's labeled G, right, okay.
Oh, we need a typo.
Okay, well, now take up item F, 744 through 746, what is it, and 750 through 752 South Portion.
Again, I'm Betsy Bradley, Director of the Cultural Resources Office, and this is appeal and denial of the demolition of two commercial buildings. They are located in the South Fourth Street Commercial National Register District in Ward 7. The owner and appellant is Carolyn McDonald, 800 4th Street, Before anything else, I want to submit into the record certified copies of ordinances 64389 and 64332, the long agenda, and my presentation. Both properties are considered to be contributing properties in the South 4th Street Commercial Historic District. They were listed in the National Register in 2006. At that time, SCM-PDM LLC, not the current owner, owns both properties. We're using both ordinances because ordinance 64832 has an additional demolition review criteria for subsequent construction, so we always use that longer ordinance set of criteria to review. So let's take a little tour of the property first. These are the two buildings. 744 on the left is Folgers and 752 on the right. Here they are. They're at the north end of the South 4th Street Work District. Shown there in 6 parcels. Here is the whole district outlined in white. It's close to here to understand where they are in this small district. Here's a bird's eye view of the block front there. The two buildings are in the middle. You can see the large 750 there extending all the way back to the street. Here are views of the rear facades of both buildings. Shows they're different, drastically different size. There's 750 on the left and 744 much older building on the right. Shell of the building. Here's a block front view, showing them down there in the block. The arch in the view reminds us of where we are take a closer look at 744. This is a building believed to be constructed in 1870, and therefore, because of its age and and decorative doorbell performance, is considered to be a high-merit building, one of the older buildings in the district, and really demonstrates the older neighborhood. You can see there's a bit of glass of the cornice on the left-hand side, and in the shadow, the banner on the left kind of falls away in the here's the interior of the southern portion of that. It's hard to see the central bay staircase, second story. So this is the interior of the side, taken from inside door from the building. And that last block is a reminder that the was altered. The National Register nomination put that back 1950 at the end of the period of significance. The last block. Light color brick. Here's an interior of 750 to 752. The warehouse building, although I think light manufacturing must have taken place in it because of the rough lighting. Because that lighting on an interior space because there's more just storage going on, or if it's just storage, the rough lighting might be enough to go. It's a very unusual space. Big open space with no interior divisions or facilities. So we have two different types of buildings and implementation challenges. The first demolition review criteria is a redevelopment plan adopted by ordinance by the planning commission. That's not possible, but plan. The architectural quality of the building is pretty much laid out by that National Register nomination. Both are visually contributing period of significance. At the time done on purpose, the maximum number of buildings could be located using historic tax credits. And the narrative of the nomination actually supports that, indicating more than I thought it might, because that was in the sort of traditional use of this area. Before there were new commercial developments elsewhere, before the development of interstate highways in the vicinity, and so the change of our the condition of the building, both meet the definitions for the town of the ordinance, and that would be the safety standard of the month. Falling down, that is the time necessary to plan and begin the implementation of the rehabilitation project. Are concerned about the collapse of the cornice. For a while, this is a photo from February when we started on this road. The buildings at each other, but they're not attached. The neighborhood effect and reuse potential is where things get interesting in this part of the city. The two-block stretch is in an unusual situation with elevated rail lines and interstate highways and exit ramps. Nevertheless, there are some relatively new restaurants on the street, so there is some commerce area, and the oyster house is across the street as well. This portion of the disintact northern block is part of the district and offers continuity and synergy as a result of located in a multi-destination place. Since that National Register listing, of course, timing wasn't particularly good. It took place in 2006, and soon after that, not very many projects forward. But some work done on a couple of the buildings here in this row, the Barbecue Place, and like I said, this could have very different opportunities. The small size and historic nature of the floor is one situation, much larger building that's another one. It could be a very interesting interior space or some kind of use. In fact, it could be used for parking. So there are challenges with both buildings, but for preservation, we would like to do capital and go forward with these buildings. Historic tax credits, both state and federal, will be available for rehabilitation projects. And the applicant has submitted based on the cost of rehabilitation and has that information. The urban design of this block is interesting and intact. The loss of water residue buildings really affects the streetscape and sense of the historic place. It is without any loss. The design suggests new construction is proposed immediately. May wish in the future to develop something the owner of other properties in this district and vicinities that not. So, going to all the demolition criteria, the fact that we start out with the Merit and High Merit building, buildings are usual in their own way, and present challenges, so there shouldn't be any unusual circumstances. So, we'll allow rehabilitation in the future. That's why I've been considering the unusual location here, the fact that we went through the process of national park security. We'll have that status, and therefore, hold the demolition of 2,000 buildings, contributing resources to the town for
Yeah, I believe there's some questions.
I just wanted to ask you if you introduced your ordinances and anything else that you'd like to introduce to the record.
Were there any other questions?
Okay, well, I do have one letter of communication from Alderman Bouchard. He emailed me that he does not support the demolition of this building. They are in the
Here for another matter.
Okay. Well, we do have many individuals assigned to speak. This is Lynn? Wynn. Okay, thank you. All right, well.
Great, thank you. I've got I brought pretty cap.
Okay, you have it. 2 minutes.
I guess.
Cool. Yeah, he's right here, that's what but before I get there, sticker, doesn't put flag. Yeah. So make sure it's about the regular.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Wynn Reed, and I represent Terry McDonald, and Terry's our landowner. And we're in the process of obviously appealing the determination. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Since you're testifying, may I ask you this morning, will you be telling the truth?
I always do.
And for clarity of the record, could you state your name and address?
Yes. My name is Winthrop B. Reed. I'm a lawyer in Lewis Rice, downtown St. Louis, 600 Washington Avenue, Suite 2500, 63105. Thank you very much. So we're here to talk about the 750 and 744 South 4th Street. We'll go to the first slide, please. And as Betsy showed you the photograph, here's our property. I wanted to just take you through a couple of the other photos. If you go to slide 2, please. This is a little bit better photograph, I think, of the fallen cornice. And it's interesting. It was a somewhat ironic photograph because you'll notice that there's a leasing sign on it, which was put up by the original developer, the Chivas Development. And if you can go to the internet and look at Chivas' website, which is essentially they're closed down, but the website is still up, to see what they were trying to sell or lease to the public as it related to developing these two buildings. And unfortunately, starting in 2006 till now, sitting in 2015, there has been no person who's interested in or closed the deal of renovating any of these buildings using any of these historic tax credits, and Chivas has gone out of business, is my understanding. So it's somewhat interesting to see the cornice falling down and frankly the sign to lease with the historic tax credits kind of in decay on the decaying building. Go to the next slide, please. This slide was to give you a better understanding of the roof. And if you look at as you face the building to the right, you can see the beginning of that chimney to slant inward. So there's substantial issues. And I understand and agree with Betsy on the 6-month rule. We get the 6-month rule. But this building is in horrific condition. And what you can't see from these photos that we couldn't get to safely was the basement of the structure has been repeatedly flooding since Terry purchased the building a year and a half ago, and we understand for a very long time. So the sub area, frankly, is too dangerous to go into, frankly, to do formal testing. So underneath is far worse, and we really don't know. And you'll see some estimates we had to perform some work. They don't include the subsurface work that would need to be done to make sure the structure is truly sound. Next slide, please. We're now at the entrance to 750, the warehouse that Betsy previously described. As she indicated accurately, it was built about 1950. Next slide, please. All right, this is, for the next 3 slides, if you can go through those quickly, please, to give you a sense of what we're dealing with as it relates to what's going on in this historic district and what's going on in these properties. The first time I had an opportunity to physically go to the site was with Terry, and was actually with Betsy, who was very kind. We walked the site together. And this building, and both these buildings, had frankly had the doors routinely kicked in, where vagrants were staying. Multiple instances, Terry said people setting fires within the structure. And as you think about historic district, because there's no question, I went and read the 39-page application. I mean, it was made the South 4th Street historic area. But these structures in this block is less than appealing for a lot of reasons. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But this gives you a sense of what we're dealing with. And Terry, as the owner, the warehouse is as clean as it's ever been, as nice as it's ever been, frankly, since he's owned it now. And it's still... It's unattractive, and as someone, frankly, I've worked downtown for 20-something years, and I get off at Highway 40 at the last Missouri exit, and I take a left on Grad and I take a left on 4th. And this has welcomed me to work for 20-something years, and it'd be wonderful to hopefully allow the city to work with Terry to hopefully make that a better area, to be honest with you. Next slide, please. All right, this is where we try to get into this basement. We try to get in. It's just impossible. The stairs within the building itself are rotted out. You can stick your head in there, but it's frankly it's somewhat it's something out of a bad movie, to be honest with you. Next slide, please. All right, so a little more about Terry McDonald and his company, 104th Street. Terry's made about a $5 million commitment in the last 7 years to downtown St. Louis. He owns 1409 Washington and then the Lombard property, which is very close to the district. It's just immediately east of it. And then obviously 744, 750, and then 800 South 7th Street. So Terry's been, I think, has been investing in our city and our community and is trying to do hopefully some good things with it. Next slide, please. What is he asking for? He wants to be able to tear down 744 and 750. Next slide, please. All right, so as we look at the architectural quality, I spent, I don't know if you've had the opportunity, but if you go through the kind of the detailed historic review of these buildings to create the historic district, what screams from that document is a lack of significance of this area. As you go through these buildings, there are no significant architects in this area. There are no historic users of any of these buildings. The genesis of Ralston Purina wasn't in any of these buildings. The genesis of Anheuser-Busch wasn't. These were very, very simple businesses with some type of residential at times in the older building, the 744 building. But frankly, 39 pages in, you're wondering why this is a historic building. And frankly, as it relates to 750, why a 1950s warehouse without bathrooms could ever be considered anything that would be so important to create this historic designation for it. And it's pretty simple. The developer got a really good and I think very talented, because she's a very nice writer and did a lot of really good research, person to put this application together. And you'd like to think that, especially in the city with the architecture we do have here, when you walk into 705 Oliver, you walk into the Wainwright building, what is truly historic jumps out at you. There's absolutely nothing in these buildings that jumps out at you and why they got this designation. But it is what it is. We got to live with it. We want to work with it, obviously. Next slide, please. Some closer pictures. There's no use of materials in this building, and I understand that the cornice, and the warehouse there's nothing differentiating about the warehouse. Next slide, please. We don't believe that maintaining, especially the warehouse, is doing anything for the streetscape. Frankly, we go to the next slide, please. You look at the surrounding area and what the streetscape looks like, okay? You walk along Euclid, you understand streetscape. South Grand, understand streetscape. This is a piece of property. I try to take pictures in all 4 directions so you get a sense. One is a very nice brand new parking lot, which is actually owned by Mr. McDonald. The other is a White Castle. Another, you have a train trestle, and then you have the back of the Oyster Bar, which was mentioned before, which is interesting because if there was ever kind of a lone soldier in that area, it's the Oyster Bar. It's one historic building supplied by that low building, the little white brick building, which is known historic, basically by itself. So if we're looking at what the neighboring area looks like, it's not consistent with a really well-preserved streetscape. Next slide, please. The other reason I put the aerial view in, and I did a little broader one than Betsy did, because to truly appreciate this South 4th Street historic area, and why I think there's been no development there, even though you've had a historic tax credit, is it's in a really bad spot. You've got a north train trestle, you have a south train trestle, and then you have a major interstate in, you have Highway 70 where it intersects with 44, right there, and then frankly you have 4th Street, and as any folks who live in the city who work downtown, is 4th Street, Gratiot dumps all the Highway 4064 traffic off at Gratiot. You take a left and you dead end at 4th and you go left. And these buildings are exactly at a light where you take the left on the 4th Street. And frankly, as a place that clearly, when these buildings were built, comprehended street traffic, walking traffic from these retail places to other places, this is a very undesirable location. Frankly, I almost got run over crossing the street. It's 3 lanes there. Okay, it's really 4 if you include the width of where you can park. It's not a comfortable place to park. You're not going to want to just pull up in street park and go into these buildings. So I think as this group reviews this area, this is very, I mean, and you already have open areas. You have the open areas where the parking lot is. It's a less than desirable area. And that's probably why no one has done anything in this space with any of those historic tax credits in 2006. Next slide, please. All right. Once again, I tried to depict for you folks who may not be as familiar with the area, the train trestle to the north is in the upper left-hand corner. The train trestle to the south is right there with the BP Amoco. The lower left picture is the on-ramp to Highway 40 from Memorial Boulevard, and to the right is another picture to the right. That orient you, as Betsy did, orient you to where the arch is related to this property. The other thing which I didn't get a picture of is if you go further north on 4th Street, there's a Midas auto repair facility there. There's now one of the reports talked about a restaurant. There's a barbecue restaurant there, right, kind of moving north. Next slide, please. The conditions, as I said before, it's a home to beggars, it's unstable, walls are caving in, the roofs are gone, the basement's flooded. The lower left-hand picture is of the first floor of 744 as I reached in through a crack in the door which had been kicked in, because they only can kick it in so far, and I reached around and took the photo of it. The hole in the ceiling is of the warehouse, which Betsy accurately described, does allow light in, but does create interesting issues from a renovation standpoint, which you're going to do. Next slide, please. So we tried to break down 4 as we look at the effect of reuse. One is, as I've said, we don't think the existing structures are appropriate for reuse. The point 2 is it's clear that the historic incentives that have been created for this site, although I understand 2006 preceded, the economic crash, there's been substantial time to pass since then, and nothing has occurred with these buildings. And frankly, the multiple buildings that have been demolished in the areas have created a beautiful, accessible, well-maintained parking area, which is in far better condition than the graffiti-stained structures that still stand. Next slide, please. As again, the third point is the difficult location of it. One thing I omitted is just the actual road noise involved. The traffic on 4th and the on-ramp alone is incredibly loud, and you start getting train activity, which is not that great anymore, to be honest. We have those 2 trestles, but there were actually gentlemen working on the train with an active train car when I took my photos. And then the 4th is the cost, and we'll go to the next slide, please. So Cherry has historically used a gentleman named McLean to do construction work for him. In order to try to get a better understanding of what these costs would be, he went back to the Chivas plans, which were what were proposed that folks could come in and do back in the 2006-2007. They were created by the Lawrence Group. This is wonderful, excellent architect. We think they're good. He used those, and he did some basic estimates for 744 of $500,000, for 750 about $416,000. And these don't include any tenant upgrade at all, so there's no tenant improvement. And frankly, due to the nature that he couldn't get into the structures, no accounting for all the stuff that you really can't see, anything subsurface, anything in the basement. I would say, I don't want to call these Kentucky windage because I think he did as good a job as he could, but from an access perspective, there's a lot more I think that would be into it. And obviously, it's historic, it's an historic thing, so I took some basic math on what they would get from a historic tax credit perspective, and then if you put a 20% discount, because it seems like nobody can sell them for 100 cents on the dollar anymore. You're looking at, I put the tax credit figures up there for you folks to see. Next slide, please. All right, the economic hardship we've already talked about. Everybody knows rehabbing is more expensive, and I understand the tax credits are help to pay that, so we get that part. The next slide, please. You know, the urban design, I think I touched on a lot of the urban design things that Betsy has raised, which is, I get what we're trying to save streetscapes. I get we're trying to save some really wonderful things that we have in St. Louis. I just really question whether this is the place to do it. And frankly, if you haven't walked that walk, it's loud, there's a lot of traffic, and it's not stopping to go to retail restaurants. The other thing that we need to raise, because this is very important to Terry as a businessman, which is the Ballpark Village folks use Texas, and they got new construction. And everybody says you can just put a restaurant in there, you can put a bar in there, and it's just gonna be great. And you're gonna get wonderful rental rates, and you get a tremendous amount of return. But I don't think any of those businesses downtown are gonna argue with the fact that Ballpark Village, by construction next to the park, has moved a lot of the business that might go to retail development in the South Fourth Historic District to Ballpark Village. I don't think there's one business person that would argue that. And they have the benefit of new construction and tax benefits, which unfortunately Mr. McCarthy isn't going to have. So next slide, please. So that's it. The last thing I wanted to do is, one of the things obviously important is what we're going to do with the property. And at the time the business, the demolition permit was asked for, there wasn't a really detailed thing, but I really want Terry to tell you a little bit about what he's trying to do with his property and what he envisions for this property, because I think it's something that I think could be good for the city, and I think comport with the guidelines the Board of Aldermen put on all developers in the city. So, Terry, if you would mind just tell me a little bit about kind of what you're thinking about.
Sure. What are the things that need to stay there? Okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I sure do.
And could you state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Terry McDowell, and my home address.
By your office, is that where you were? Okay.
My office address is 14949 Manchester Road, and that's in Baldwin, Missouri. It's 63011. Okay. Thank you. You did a great job of explaining our situation. I purchased the property from a gentleman by the name of Steve Murphy, and I don't know if any of you folks have had any dealings with him in the past, but he became a troubled property owner in that area. And since then, he's had some situations where he had to maybe get rid of some of the property in order to maintain some of the others that he owned down there. I happened to purchase this property along with a package of some other ones by virtue of a call from a banker and maybe a little coercion by them to get me to do it. So I had no plans for these two buildings whatsoever. However, when I bought them, they were, as you see, they're in about the condition they're in now, except that there was a tent city in the larger building. And then there was a smaller arrangement of folks living in the 744 building right next door. What I did was I kept boarding them up, and every other day they were being unboarded by the folks down there looking for warmth or a place out of the heat. So what I did instead of boarding them up is I opened them up, and as a result of that, I have all kinds of graffiti now on the inside and the outside of the building, and there's no amount of power washing and painting, spray painting that could, I think, curtail these people from doing that. We've actually even spoke with a couple of the members of the local artists to see if they wouldn't mind stopping doing it, and they just, I guess to no avail, we're just not getting any agreement. Anyway, as Wynn was saying earlier, that the basement on 744, we can't even go in there, it's too dangerous, and it's full of water. Even probably today it's full of water. I haven't been down there for a couple of days, but in light of all the difficulties that we're having with the environment there, in regards to the profitability of the businesses around that area, I'm not going to try to compare ourselves to a White Castles or a Midas, but for me to put retail down there right now is a little bit of, it's a little bit of a gamble. And I don't, the building, the 744 building, maybe there could be something done with it. I don't know for a fact, until we would dig a little bit deeper into it. But when you look at it from a layman, it just does not look doable at all. If you physically stand there, feel it, see it, it just does not look doable. The warehouse, like I said, I don't believe anybody could stand at the warehouse and look at it and say, yeah, that's something we're saving. But if we were to save 744 and somehow and turn it into some kind of retail/restaurant, because that seems to be what works down in a restaurant. And some of it's struggling because of Ballpark Village. So, including O'Kelly's, which is just, I believe, went up for sale. I don't know if it's sold yet or not, but they're having some difficulty selling it. The building right next door, which is, from this picture, it has kind of a yellowish bottom and the brick upper part, second, third floor, is kind of dilapidated as well and hollowed out and nothing in it. And O'Kelly's occupies the other two right next to it. At the bare minimum, what I could possibly see would be to tear down the warehouse because it has no value to it, no significant, it just doesn't look good, okay, period. And it occupies way too much depth of the property. And there's no really good way of putting in the receptacles that you need to operate a business. And that's the proper waste removal. Okay, so if you were going to operate a restaurant, you're going to have two different receptacles to operate a restaurant. You're going to need some kind of parking for the people that actually work there. You're going to need a maintenance, in all the buildings that I get involved in, I put a maintenance shed. I call it a shed, but it's actually a separate part of the back of the building so people can actually back up their trucks and get to it and do the kinds of things that you would need to do to correct any issues in the building, mechanically. And like Wayne was saying, these figures that we have, we were told by Betsy, not to fluff anything, and we did. In fact, I told Mr. McLean, hey, just write it up, bare bones, what you think, so that when we present it, we don't come off as somebody that was trying to fluff our way out of doing what it is we want to do. Anyway, I think that probably the figures will probably come in at least another 30% higher. And the 744 building was originally set up as some kind of retail on the bottom, and then there was a residential up top. So it doesn't, the second story doesn't lend itself very well for anything other than maybe storage or pretty much just storage or maybe an office. And you really can't get the kind of revenue out of office or storage that you would like to get. I think it's $1 or $2 a square foot for storage. And office down there probably, I just don't even know if it would work. But, I hope I'm not talking too much. These are the things that are going through my mind as the property owner. And, yes, I like the idea of a really neat old streetscape. In fact, one of my ideas were to, I spent a month and a half in Calgary about a year and a half ago, and they had a similar kind of setup, street front, but it was much longer, and some of the buildings were set back, some out forward. There were some trees out in front of the setback buildings and places for people to hang out. We don't have that situation here. And if you were to build some kind of green space in the back, you're backed up right to, just a highway and, exit ramps and a highway that just keeps getting painted over by MoDOT instead of power washing it off. And look, I'd like to do something good for down there, but I think possibly if we could get 750 to be gone, I could possibly set back a building behind, off the street a little bit, and put some people up front on the street in some kind of a beer garden kind of a situation that would focus around 744. And then if maybe I had to build something off the back of 744 later on to accommodate, some restaurant space for cooking or brewing or something like that. There's a lot of breweries popping up here and there. I can foresee that. But that's my opinion. I don't have any drawings. I didn't, it's kind of a off-the-cuff thing with me, because I didn't, when I purchased the properties, I purchased them as a package, and I wasn't really thinking 100% about this, but I started thinking a little bit more recently before this meeting, and these are some rough ideas, and I think it can be doable. So that's my bid. Thank you.
Were there any questions?
Thank you all.
Yes. Can we go back to the PowerPoint area view 15?
What is PowerPoint? Sure.
Thank you. Shall get this.
Come on, Mel.
At 15? It's the area view. Yeah, right there. Okay. Over in the corner to the right, St. Mary Victory's Church, the Hungarian church. People come from all over the city, the county, to get pastries, go to special things. And that has always been in a bad location ever since that highway was right down in front of it. So people would go down there. We love the Broadway bookstore. I could almost foresee not maybe a three-state that way, but a section that way, you know, with that green space and whatever. I think people would come. I've never been to that area like Broadway, Western Garden, Airport, a lot of people there, and again, it's a church. And I shouldn't say this, but I kind of agree with you on that 1950s building, but certainly this is interesting enough. I think it's, and with all the wonderful chefs that are winning exchange beer boards, you know, all over town, you know.
I agree with you 100%.
We're going to that church, just to kind of see, because there are a lot of people that do go down there, so, you know, it's just, I mean, you feel better that there are people, in addition to people that are
Right, I agree with you. One of the things that, just from talking to people in the area, is they're afraid of the other side of the highway for multiple reasons. Number one, it's very blighted on the east side. Right, there's quite a few. But it's mostly industrial warehouse, and it's weeded up. And
go to the church.
On the other side of the church, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and especially at nighttime. So one of the things that would be really, really nice, and I know the city's limited with funds, we all are, is if we could come up with some kind of better lighting underneath the highway. And that would be something I think that MoDOT would be able to help us out with. And then some lighting on the other side of the highway, because it's pretty scary. I like to consider myself a guy that could possibly take care of himself, but I don't even like going over there, and I own the property. So, I'm just expressing what I'm hearing from folks, and I think it all starts with a stick, okay, and we just start building from there. And you know, the 750 building is a problem. The 744 building has its own set of problems. That building, no matter what, no matter how hard I would try, no matter how hard anybody would try, is going to be an expensive task, even with the tax credits. Even if I had 100% tax credit, and I think you guys all know how that works, you have to sell them back to the bank to be able to use them.
Dressels in Central West End, their second floor is a private party place, and it's used a lot too, so you wouldn't have to just do office or storage.
You're right. And one of the things, too, about it is it's not very big. The footprint is kind of small. And so I want to be positive. I really do. And I think the building is kind of cool looking. And I think there's some things that we can do to it to make it viable. But in order for me to do that, I'm going to need all kinds of access to all sides of the building. The roof is gone. I have to completely replace the roof, and not just the roof, the actual structure of the roof. Rebuild, the chimneys, and where do you start? Do you start the top down, or do you start the bottom up? I think you have to start by at least keeping it from getting water inside of it. And right now, it's just raining into the building. It's just the way it is, and it's rotting everything. And there's mold issues. There's just issues that you can't see. So yeah, I would have to start by securing the top of the building, and then go underneath and then go from the bottom up. And it's doable. It's just.
Okay, one last suggestion.
Sure.
Central West End House of Guard Tour, 29th of May, 30th and 31st. A house on Pershing Place with like the Bates Hotel, you know, on Psycho. You know, I mean, it was totally closed down. They had spent a lot of money on it. It's stunning. And to see the before and after, it's just, you know, hard for people that haven't been through that to know what can be done. And I know you know about it.
Well,
But just take a look, see what.
I wouldn't mind. You told me the address. Can I get it in writing from you? Because I forget it very easily.
4961.
4961. Perfect. Okay. Yes. And was that a home? Okay. And I agree. I think we'll all don't mind maybe going a little more above and beyond for the places we live in. But when it comes to a building that is supposed to give you a return, you know, you have to use a different set of rules for that. And the banks don't like for you to, you know what I'm getting at. So it has to make sense. Because what I'll probably end up doing is using some kind of my own fund and then some from the bank. So it's something I have to sell to them as well. It's not just me. And I like to go down and rebuild the whole city the way it was 75 or 80 years ago. It'd be pretty neat. But it's just, you know, at some point in time you have to just say, yeah, I can, or no, it just doesn't make any financial sense. I'm sorry I'm not looking over here at you folks. You look nice. Thank you. Okay.
How long have you owned the property?
1 year. 1 year. Yeah.
So, in the PowerPoint from Mr. McLean, there was a request to tear both the buildings down. Are you removing that request now, or are you just going for one?
Well, you know, if I were to save 744, we can give it a shot, okay? I have to get the other building down, because one of the two operations that we need to take place is rebuilding the structure. And that building, that being there, the warehouse, does not allow for us to get to it without it being just unbelievable expense to do it. Because we're going to get cranes in there, and just, it's not something done by hand from a set of ladders and scaffolding. So, yes, I would definitely need for 750 to not be there. And then what I would like to do is possibly come back to you folks later on down the line after we gave the 744 an attempt, is to maybe build another building and set it back so that there's some, like a garden area in front of it, a place where people wouldn't mind congregating and having dinner or lunch or breakfast or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
So you weren't that set on taking both of these down?
You know, they really should come down. They're dangerous. Both of them are very dangerous, and they're both going to be extremely expensive to do.
If they did both come down, what would your plan be for that site?
My plan was to be put up some type of restaurant/retail. Okay, and what works on there is restaurant. I just can't see any retail down there. It's not really working. It's all food there.
So you're not looking for a surface parking lot for baseball games?
No. What I'd like to see is, you know, just a little bit in the back, you know, for the staff and the employees, for you know, mechanical people to do their work. But minimize that to where it's just, you know, enough for whatever an 8-hour period of employment would take for that space. And I would figure it might be 8 or 10 spaces or 15, 20, whatever the number is. It would fit conveniently back there. But what I was going to say is, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe you folks could help us get Cedar Street, which is right behind it, somehow available for parking for us too. But there's also a lot south of there that I own that would provide a reasonable amount of parking for the buildings that are around it. And it's all brand new. I don't know if you've been down and involved it.
Okay. I guess wanted to let you know it's common practice of this board to require a development plan before they allow removal approval of buildings from the historic district like this.
Okay.
So, you could come back to us if the vote doesn't go your way tonight. Either have a plan to develop that one building, save it, and put something next to it, or take them both down.
Okay.
But a request for demolition of the historic district without a development plan doesn't have much of a chance on it.
Okay, I understand that. But, if nothing else, you guys have a chance to meet me, and I do have good intentions. So, right now it's being used as a parking garage, okay? And the reason why we're doing that is because there are still taxes that come in on the buildings that are useless for me right now. And I have to pay those taxes, and in order for me to do that, I need to generate some kind of revenue. And that's what we're doing right now. I don't like it, it is what it is, but for right now, that's what we're doing. So, yeah.
You probably know that if you buy, I think, food at Lancaster, you get free parking for the ball thing. So if people come to your restaurant, you can park and go to the ball and free.
Yeah, I've been approached by, I don't know if you folks have ever met John over at the Oyster Bar. Interesting fellow. He's been on here for 30 years. Good guy. He actually anticipated there could be a possibility that maybe he might be able to use that property, 750 or 744, and it turned out it wasn't going to work out for him, so he's building up to the north side of his property now. There are parking challenges, there are challenges with traffic, there are challenges with the railroads, and another thing, you guys may or may not be aware of, if you've driven by there, the Lombard Street, I can't describe it any other better way of looking like it was just bombed by an air squadron. It is horrible. And underneath the highway is difficult, and then on the backside scary. So, I'm delicately trying to dance around doing one thing at a time down there, and I would like to see it a better place and a safer place. And I think we've done a pretty good job so far with the cleanup we've done. And in a nutshell, that's what our intentions are. Maybe there's some other pieces we can acquire over the next couple months or maybe even a year that would help us in our plight to make it a little bit nicer now. So, thanks for hearing me out.
Okay, are there any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you all.
Any motions for?
Move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's decision.
There's a second for the motion?
Second.
Been moved and seconded.
My argument is just as stated there, that we need a development plan for.
I was going to say, there's a lot of very persuasive arguments in here, and I've been to that area. I probably wouldn't go to that area by myself, but as stated, that without having a plan of what's going to happen, I can't see this building torn down.
So with that, next step, we're working for that. If we want to do something positive, you all folks want to.
Yeah, were there any other? We have a motion and a second. We're discussing.
And I just, while I got the microphone, I want to say, I think there's a lot of merit in 744. There are a lot of bad things said about that building during this presentation. Half of Stewart and Benton Park would be gone if we use those standards. So, and I think that district is very interesting. It's what's left of what was a vibrant near South Side. So there's a lot to be said for saving everything.
Yeah. Another comment?
Yeah, I agree with both Commissioner and Commissioner Pope. I think I do question the behavior of 750 and my understanding not a part of the time significant sewer district. Okay.
That is that.
That is.
Any further discussion or comment?
Just to answer the applicant's question, if you just need to work with the, design professional or plan, so at least staff can direct you on how that could possibly work.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no further discussion. We will call. We'll do a roll call. Anthony Robinson?
Yes.
On the motion.
That was a yes in favor of the motion?
In favor of the motion. Melanie Packman?
Yes.
Michael Lynn?
Yes.
Nate Johnson?
Yes.
Kennedy, yes. Aaron Wright?
Six.
Okay. All right, vote, we passed the motion. The nine. Yeah, the motion was to hold. The direction now. By your vote, you passed the motion. But now take this to item G.
Andre Gagan with the Cultural Resources Office, Result of Truth. Need 3107 Shenandoah Avenue. Need to introduce into the record ordinance 64689 as amended by 64925 and the enabling ordinance and ordinance 5702 optional. Is 3107 Shenandoah. Our building question is the turret cap, which has currently been secured for under the park area. The applicant has a current application to replace the original turret cap with the larger version of the same design. Problem that they're experiencing is water infiltration in that area, and they're proposing the larger cap. The original cap, actually, showing the location. This is a comparison of the original cap and proposed cap. As you can see, the original cap top section was 1 foot width that is not included 2 foot down. The proposed is 2 foot 4 inches, which is double the size of cap, and that's not totally. This is a photo of original cap. Key cover and stuff. There is a symbol down on that. Existing. These are some other similar caps in the neighborhood. As you can see, none of them are very large scale, similar to what proposed turret cap incorporates the original in sign but not size. Changes the dimension of the turret cap which noticeably alter the appearance of the building. It would be much larger than similar caps. Staff believes there's other methods of staffing a roof revision. Placement of slate needs the cap or installing a better barrier beneath the slate. Based on summary findings, Cultural Resource Officer and Preservation Board pulled the director's denial of the application and placed the turret cap in the large version. And we're just going to comply with the
Any questions?
And also, if you have an email from the Alderman who is in support.
Did you have any comments on it?
I do. Can I let the homeowners go first? Or is it easier for me to go first? Okay.
And the
Yeah, we did get a letter from the bill stated. Yes, thank you.
Yes. Are you going to tell the truth in this? Yes, I will. And could you state your name and address?
Sure. Jan Kleinheim, 3107 Shenandoah.
Thank you.
So I passed out kind of an outline of what I'm going to talk about in case I lose you, and then also some letters and photos we'll refer to. First, thank you for the opportunity to appeal our permit denial. We wanted to present a brief background on the project to explain why we're proposing this change, that we're not just randomly trying to change the short building. We also wanted to respond to the three concerns that the Cultural Resources Office had, and then share the support that we've gotten from the Neighborhood Association and our alderman on behalf of the proposal. In terms of the background, we purchased the house about 2 years ago. We love it. It's our home. We view it as both a piece of history and a piece of art. And so our goal has been to restore and protect its historic use. We've been doing significant exterior repairs so far. I know you guys have enjoyed all our permits. We've done about $40,000 on the exterior so far. And although it's not the $5 million of the previous project, for us that's a lot of money. Many of those repairs are related to the turret. It was the only section, you can probably tell from the photos, the only section that still has the original slate on it. And so we had the original slate repaired, and it cost us close to $7,000 to do so. And they did it with a mix of the original slate that they could salvage, they brought in some reclaimed slate to match, and then also some new slate, where they could find enough reclaimed. While repairing the slate roof, the contractor made the recommendation that we increase the finial cap size. And the reason he did that is when you get to the point of the turret, obviously, it gets to be a sharper curve. And because slate does not curve, you end up having to make smaller and smaller pieces to get it to fit around. And he described it as being kind of pieced together like a puzzle, as opposed to the rest of the slate roof. The condition of those small slates has degraded. Basically, when they touched them, they would just disintegrate. We're assuming they're original. The copper finial cap has also deteriorated with time. So there's a hole at the top, it's got some tendrils that have fallen off, the copper's thinning. So based on his extensive experience with slate roofs and historic houses, he said, hey, why don't you get a new finial made that covers these problematic areas of slate? That would be better to protect the house from water infiltration over the long run. So it's taken us a year, in case you wonder why the blue tarp has been there so long. Basically, to find someone capable of replicating the finial, we emailed the Cultural Resource Office, our contractor found people, we did an online search, we finally found these guys who can replicate it. And we also did a lot of research to make sure how we actually want to adjust it. So one of the recommendations that our contractor had made was we could use the original finial and just put a cone under it. But our thought was that the look of the tendrils was kind of an important part of the look of the house. So we preferred to make the cap longer with the tendrils still hanging off of it, as opposed to them being on top of the cone. We're also saving us more money, obviously. But anyway, so we finally had this cap ready to go. We came to get the permit, and Cultural Resources had 3 concerns with it. So the first was that it would noticeably alter the appearance of the building. And we understand that if I was holding 2 objects, and one was 1 foot and one was 2 foot 4 inches, that would look very different. However, we think it's a small magnitude of change when you look at the entire size of the turret and the magnitude of the house itself. It will also be approximately 40 feet off the ground, so it's far away from us as opposed to just in our hands. And so we think that from the street view, the house will not look that different with the new cap. The other thing from the front view is that the dormer window and its cap actually hides much of the cap anyway, as we were having trouble seeing the tendrils earlier. Concern number 2 is that it was much larger than similar caps in the neighborhood. So the pictures that I handed out are actually 6 other houses in our neighborhood, in the Compton Hill Historic District, within a block or 2 of our house, who we believe have similar size caps to the new one that we are proposing. And the last one there is our house, that shows you its current size, and basically the new size would extend to the bottom of that slate that the tendril finger is landing on, if that makes sense. You can kind of compare where ours would be to where those currently are. We agree that the Compton Hill Historic District has a wide variety of unique finials. Well, while we were researching our repair, we were trying to find some old photos to see if it ever had anything on top of it. And we studied a lot of finials in the area. We never found one that had the tendrils like ours, which again was the reason why we wanted to make sure we kept them. So that's the photos of, in our opinion, it does fit in the scope of the neighborhood finials. And then concern 3 was that there might be other methods, such as replacing the slate beneath or installing a better barrier beneath the slate. And so the Cultural Resources staff had recommended that we ask our contractor to give us a bid just to replace the 3 that he had left. And so we do have that bid. It would be $5,626. And what he would do is remove the slate that exists, put a barrier, and then put all new slate in those 3 rows, custom cut to fit the turret. When he provided that bid, he also reiterated that they do not think that is the best route to take. Because of the small size of the slate pieces at the top, there's going to be more potential gaps and water infiltration spots between those slates than the larger slates further down. And then even if they put a good underlayment under it, they're going to be nailing all those holes into it. So there's going to be a lot of small puzzle pieces, each with a nail through it. So an underlayment is going to be immediately compromised. Our concern, the contractor didn't mention this, but my husband and I, is that when they did the rest of the turret, they were able to mix original slate, reclaimed slate, and new slate, so there's no obvious repair spot. It just kind of looks like dappled light. And if they do 3 new ones at the top, those are not going to look dramatically different than the rest of the turret. So in our opinion, this alternative would be less effective in protecting the house from water infiltration and damage. It would be less attractive due to the noticeable difference in the slate, and it would be significantly more expensive. Then finally, in terms of support, since our home is located in the Compton Hill Historic District, we reached out to the Compton Heights Neighborhood Betterment Association, who do not belong within their borders. We asked their opinion of the proposed change. After reviewing our plan and sketch, they wrote us a letter of support endorsing our permit, and you've got that there. And I think the attachment right under my outline. So they're endorsing the project, and then we also discussed the proposal with our alderman, Jack Kochar, who's here tonight in support of our permit application as well. So again, thank you for your careful consideration of our appeal, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman, did you?
Briefly, yes, Mr. Chairman. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, just like me and every one of my colleagues in the Board of Aldermen always does. I'm Jack Coder, I'm the 7th Board Alderman. I reside at 1045 Ann Avenue in Soulard, Historic District. I'm here in support of Jan and John's proposal to put a slightly larger finial cap on the turret of their house at 3107 Shenandoah. I would respectfully request that this wonderful body overrule the director's decision and grant the appeal of the homeowners. Jan and John have made considerable investments in this beautiful home. As I think they've shown in the pictures, if you were to go back to the first slide, or if you were to refer to your packets, a 16-inch expansion of this cap from street view would not be dramatically different. As I said, this would help keep out inclement weather, keep the elements out of their beautiful turret at far less expense than replacing all those individual shingles. I dare say, I wonder how many people would have even applied for a permit in this process, or would have just simply done this and maybe asked for forgiveness later. Jan and John have gone through the process, and I don't believe they should be penalized for that. Further, I mean, I think there are pictures that they've attached in their wonderful packets from other houses in the neighborhood showing other rather large finial caps, further support their desire to replace this with a new cap that would look the same, be made out of the same materials, and just slightly larger. I think this one's sort of a no-brainer. I hope the board will grant their appeal and overturn the director. I would like to say thank you to all of you for your wonderful service. This is my first time coming to a Preservation Board meeting. I've quite enjoyed it. I really appreciate the work you guys do for very little pay. So thank you.
Any questions? We did have, what else? Did you want to make a comment?
Mr. Husband, I'm here.
What he said it all. All right.
I'm not opposed.
Any discussion from the commission? Okay, then. Any motion?
Okay, I move we overturn the director's denial and allow the cap to be installed as presented.
Second. Been moved and seconded to overrule the director's denial. Any discussion on the motion?
Okay. Well, I respect the director's and staff's opinion on this, but the evidence presented by the homeowner, it seems like their solution is practical and affordable, and happy that they're investing in their city, doing it in a responsible way.
Okay. Okay. You look. So don't look at me.
Now you're sounding like the other two.
But I also appreciate your comment, the fact that you did it the right way, by applying for the permits and so forth.
No other comments, discussion? Call the roll. Member Stanton?
Yes.
Anthony Robinson?
Yes.
Michael Green?
Yes.
Nate Johnson?
You tell me who said last.
Okay. Aaron Wright?
Yes.
Alderman Kinsey, yes.
Motion carries 5-0, unanimous.
By a vote, we have adopted the motion on item. Thank you.
We'll have a party, right?
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we next have item H, correct?
Yes.
Petition to designate financial.
Yes, and it might be stated for the record that this body is holding a public hearing as required by ordinance on the type of petition that the director is going to set forth.
Yes.
This is, something very positive, and so we don't do too often, so I'm going to go over a bit of procedure. The proposal is to recommend or not city designation as a landmark of 3130 Gifford Street. This is the house that I actually born in. Here is the house, a very common type of house in St. Louis, in the Pumpkin Hill neighborhood. Here it is on Great Street. Area out here to get a better context. Oh, I'm sorry, for a minute I thought it was upside down. All right, this is kind of looking north. The house is on Hickory, Compton Avenue, is to the east, and still remains kind of what was in the midst of densely developed lot neighborhood is now the border of the very more mixed Compton Hill neighborhood. There's some historic houses above the houses that you probably know. The very bottom of the aerial there is the Compton Hill Baptist Church, which is designated as a landmark in early 2014. So that's the neighborhood we're in again, and here's another view of the house. It has an entrance on the side, and we have full width front room. Stanmore Maps indicates single family dwelling from this block, which is mostly a two-story brick flat. So, in the landmark process, the following steps have been completed. I worked with the owner, portfolio background. I was approached by Alderwoman Davis and members of my family and the property owner, Bronzo Wright, expressing interest in becoming a city landmark. So I worked with them and with Ray, who's here in Ray Nunley, our intern, on developing the petition for the interested parties. And it's right to sign the petition and make sure she understood all the landmark standards and safety for her. And so we're ready to move forward with a complete signed petition. At its May 6th meeting, the Planning Commission considered the proposed landmark and determined that it would be in compliance with the city's license plan and would have a positive impact on the development of the city. And I communicated by letter to the Public Service, which is also tasked to review these with the same positive support. So today we're at the point where we need to have a hearing, and the board then needs to make one of the three decisions to approve the petition as submitted, approve it with modifications, or disapprove the petition, and then approve the petition, then you would recommend that I go ahead and prepare for a bill. The landmark petition, which I give you received in mail, heavy reading, and we all know who Maya Angelou is, and we're happy that they claim her as the native, even though she lived here only a very short time. But this building meets the requirements for being representing a significant character or value as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the city. I know that this house in the Compton Hill African-American neighborhood is the location of Marguerite Johnson, later known as Maya Angelou. Is dwelling on the property in the city is most closely associated with her early years of residence, and she spent most of her childhood. House was done by her maternal grandparents, and it was a multi-generational family, occupancy in this building, and her grandmother was a woman who bought a house for a lot of years. Mostly while I was together to really understand that. She came back and when the family lived on Caroline, and she had a school year here, St. Louis, and more than that part of her childhood that very early here. And of course the petition goes on and celebrates with family parent board and all about our Alderwoman Davis. I thought she could be here today. I think we're ready for the public hearing. Formally open that and ask for testimony, and I probably won't have any, but I think we're going to what Barb said as far as the other.
Yes, if the proceeding is considered to be open, Chairman, for a public hearing, is there anyone here who would like to make further comments?
And it appears we have any. So then there's no comment in terms of public hearing portion. We can officially close that portion.
Well, yeah, we're still in the public hearing. I think that a motion can be entertained from the board as to how to proceed if the board is going to approve the petition and ask the director to prepare the board bill so that the plan will have to go forward or not.
It will open for discussion.
Sure.
Any? Open for any motions at this point. You have a motion?
I can make a motion.
Sure.
I motion that, that Preservation Board approves the petition as submitted by the property owner and direct that a landmark designation to the landmark preservation plan be prepared for consideration by the board of officers.
Do we have a second for the motion? Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Well, I think the feeling that it's a great idea to do and to have this designation. For anyone who may know John Wyndham of the public schools, his sister Alice Wyndham was Maya Angelou's closest friend here in the city of St. Louis. And whenever she would come, they would travel all over the city together, going to restaurants and just hanging out, if you ever know Alice. In fact, a photograph, if you've ever seen a photograph of Malcolm X with his finger like this and he's wearing an African shirt, Alice Wyndham took that picture. When she was living in Ghana with Malcolm X, shortly Carmichael was there. At that time, W.E. Du Bois was still living. And so she's a famous individual in herself and a close friend to Maya Angelou.
Did you get a copyright?
She has a copyright on it. And she's also mentioned in the autobiography of Malcolm X. He mentioned Alice Wyndham being in Ghana with Maya Angelou. All lived there together. Yeah. Lots of history. That's such an excellent idea to want this information. Any other comments? No. We can call the roll. Melanie, thank you.
Yes.
Anthony Robinson?
Yes.
Michael Colleen?
Yes.
Aaron Wright?
Yes.
Sarah Kinsey, yes.
Very good. The motion passes unanimously. Staff is so directed.
Are there any other, that complete the agenda items?
I have no other business.
No other business? Any other business from the meeting to adjourn? We have a motion to adjourn? Second. Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned.